In movies, aligning planets leads to astronomical events. But does this happen often? Can we see a conjunction? Will we feel it? We will discuss this today on 1 Degree of Sky Time. Looking up at the sky, people noticed that there are certain objects that moved at a different rate than the stars behind them. They call these things wandering stars or the wanderers. These are today's planets. They noticed that there are many of them, and they took this same path across the sky, which we call the ecliptic. But not all of them traveled quite the same way. If you look closely at some of the wanderers, they would just travel up from one horizon, go across the ecliptic to the other horizon, from the east to the west. But other objects would take off, and then they would hover after a while, and then tend to come back. Now, this is a process that happened over many, many days over the course of the year, so not in a single night, but it's something that they observed. They also observed that sometimes these objects would come closer and closer and closer, and these paths would overlap, and that is what we call a conjunction. And conjunctions were considered special events historically. Now, if we consider what can happen to us from a conjunction, well, we experience about 600 newtons or 140 pounds from standing on the Earth, and the Earth is enormous, as you can tell from the value for the mass of the Earth with all those zeros on there. But if we were to move away from the Earth and look at other planets and think about the force that they exert on us, like, let's imagine we were to look at a planet such as Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is much larger than the Earth, but it's so far away that the force we would experience would be 0.00 newtons or 0.00, just, it's like nothing. We would not notice this force, it's so small. And multiple planets lining up exerting a force on us, well, it's just not much to do anything. So we see this in movies. It's a clever notion, but it's kind of funny. Now, when we look at what's happening when planets are in conjunction, what's happening is from our perspective. So it's not planets lining up with the sun, or all the planets lining up, but it's basically as these planets are moving around the sun, that they align from our perspective on the Earth. Where we see them in space means we've seen a conjunction of these planets. The neat thing about the planets is that each of the planets had different symbols. When people are thinking of Mars, they're thinking of masculinity, they're thinking of war, as the symbol indicates, and we see a little spear coming off on the end. When you think of Venus, you can think of that as being a mirror you're clutching in your hand and looking at the beauty and the femininity that goes with that. Venus, the planet of the women. And then we look at Jupiter, the king planet. We have a large scepter that the king of all planets would hold in his hand. And then we have Saturn, which has a representation of time with harvest, a sieve, a device which is used to cut the wheat or the hay at the end of the season. Well, using stellarium, we can find a very fun new conjunction happening this fall of 2020, and that is with Jupiter and Saturn. They've been getting gradually closer to each other each night as they follow the sun. The distance between them is about 3 hands behind, about 3 hours behind for most of the fall, and it's coming less and less, closer to 2 hours follow time. So that means as the sun is heading towards the west, these two are going to lag behind there, and they'll set just after it goes down. So as the sky is rotating, I'm a few days before the 21st here, we can see as the sun is approaching the horizon, these two are right behind it. And if we zoom in on them, even a couple days before, we see the separation is just so small. And that's part of the question we're going to have. Will this appear to us as two objects very close together, or just as one very bright object? I think with binoculars or telescope, you can definitely separate those. They do say though, with the telescope, you can get both of them in the same eyepiece. So now I am moving it up a couple of days forward. Let's get into the 21st here. And as we get there, and as we watch these two come down the horizon, I can go ahead and turn the atmosphere back on, and we can take a look at these. We can see that they disappear, Jupiter and Saturn. They are as far away from us about as they could get. They're on the other side of the sun. So as the sun sets, though, they're still very bright objects. Jupiter is a very bright object. It's going to pop out first, and Saturn's right there with it, so they should blur together. And at this point, we can take a look at what we have and enjoy this for a couple hours at most, depending on how your horizon is, what kind of objects you have in the way. A pair of binoculars, a small telescope, take a look and just see how bright these are, and see if you can see those moons popping out around those two planets in your field of view. So, fun object coming up, December 21st, 2020. There's more conjunctions, but this is one of the coolest ones. Fall time to get towards Christmas time is a great time for conjunctions. 2,000 years ago, there's a lot of conjecture on what was the conjunction for the Christmas star. Was it Venus and Jupiter coming together? Or was it a host of 3 to 4 different planets that came together? That has been the speculation of many astronomers throughout history. So thank you for joining me for 1 Degree of Sky Time. Keep looking up and enjoy these fun events while they last. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.